And Community Economic Development Committee will now come to order.
Plus an original for the bottom. Comes the original, or do you have?
Can the staff please read item number 1 into the record?
Michael Keck, CLA, item number 1, LEHD and CAO report relative to a request for approval of funding recommendations and authority to execute corresponding contracts pursuant to 2011 Housing Opportunities Persons with AIDS RFP, authorization to execute various HOPWA contracts and amendments, and approval of revisions to the bylaws of the LA County-wide HOPWA Advisory Committee.
Okay. Seeing no questions from members of the committee, and also I do not have any public cards before me. Public comment is open. Seeing no cards before me, public comment is closed. With that, we'll adopt the CAO's report without objection. Item number 2.
Item number 2, CRA report relative to authorization to execute a tri-party MOU with the City of Los Angeles Public Works Bureau of Engineering and the Friends of the Hollywood Freeway Central Park, and transfer not to exceed $2 million to the City of LA, acting by and through its BOE via existing co-op agreement to act as a lead agency for preparation of environmental analysis and/or environmental impact report and environmental impact statement for the Hollywood Freeway Central Park in the Hollywood redevelopment project area.
Okay. Public comment is open on item number 2. Seeing no public comment cards filled out and before me, public comment is now closed. With that, members, I recommend we receive and file this report. Okay, that's such as the action of the committee. Item number 3.
Do you want to take 3, 4, and 5 together?
Yes, please.
Okay. Item number 3, CRA report relative to fiscal year 2010-2011, fourth quarter AB 1290 status report. Item number 4, CRA report relative to its annual report of financial transactions to the State Controller and State Department of Housing and Community Development for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2011. Item number 5, CRA report relative to the quarterly status of its investments as of September 30th, 2011.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no public comment cards before me on items 3, 4, and 5, public comment is now open. Public comment is now closed. With that, we'll note and file item number 3 and approve the agency's recommendations on item number 4 and note and file item number 5, such as the action of the committee. Now that puts us on item number 6. Please read into the record.
Item number 6, motion Wesson for Cardenas, Huizar, and CLA and CAO report relative to the implications of the California Supreme Court ruling on the case of CRA versus Matt Santos to the city and relevant issues and dates associated with the resulting elimination of the CRA-LA and a possible successor entity for the CRA-LA and related actions. This item is scheduled for council today.
Okay, thank you very much. Seeing that we have 10 cards before us, we will go to public comment first. On the first 10 cards, we will open it up for public comment for 2 minutes apiece, maximum. Okay, for the first 12 cards. And then after that, any subsequent cards, we will move to 1 minute apiece due to time constraints. So with that, in the order that I have them before me, we have Robin Hughes. And please come forward as I call your name. Carrie Morrison, Lebron Gubler, Lebron. And then we have Barbara Schultz. Okay, please begin to my right.
Hello.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Robin Hughes, and I'm the president of Abode Communities. We're a nonprofit housing development organization that's been working in the city for over 40 years. First, I really just want to express my sympathy to the redevelopment agency staff. It's an institution that I've worked with for over 2 decades, and with friends and colleagues that are severely impacted by this decision to eliminate redevelopment. I just want to wish them well through this really difficult time. Secondly, I just want to encourage this committee to recommend to the City Council that the City of LA become the successor agency for the redevelopment agency. It will ensure that the many assets that have been built by the redevelopment agencies and developers in this community have a smooth transition. It makes sense to extend employment for the redevelopment staff who have institutional knowledge of the programs and policies and will be good stewards of these assets. If the City Council elects not to proceed with being the successor for the entire redevelopment agency, I would hope that the Council would approve that the housing functions actually transition to the Housing Department in particular. Again, I feel that the Housing Department has the infrastructure not only to deal with projects that are in the production phase, but the infrastructure to manage those assets that have covenants and long-term commitment. I hope that that's the direction that the Council decides to go in. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, please.
Hi, my name is Carrie Morrison. I'm the Executive Director of the Hollywood Property Owners Alliance, managing 2 business improvement districts. You have a huge task ahead of you. I will speak very quickly. I'm here more just to show that Hollywood is in the room. We appreciate the enormity of your task and the speed with which you have to make it, the complexities. I totally understand that. We are just here to tell you that to the extent that it's possible that the City of LA and its staff and we as stakeholders somehow have an optimal voice in the dismantling of the agency, we would hope that you could work toward that solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Lebron Gubler, President and CEO of the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce. Let me just echo what Carrie has said. The Chamber was very involved in the early 80s in bringing redevelopment to Hollywood. The Chamber raised the funds for the feasibility study and lobbied to bring redevelopment there because nothing else had worked to turn Hollywood around. And over the last 26 years, the CRA has had an enormously positive impact on Hollywood, as we all know. So we all feel terrible about what's happening. We know we have some of the best, finest civic workers in this agency working for the good of the community. We realize it's a very hard decision you're facing, that this timeline is ridiculous, having to make a decision in such a short time frame, and there are very complicated issues regarding liability and other factors. However, if it can be worked out, we would certainly like to see the city become the successor agency from the standpoint of the ability to control the destiny of some of the projects that are in the process, as well as to keep local control. So we would urge you, as you look at alternatives, to see if there's some way to achieve that as a goal to be the successor agency. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Good morning. My name is Barbara Schultz. I'm an attorney with Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles, and I'm here representing the Wiggins plaintiffs. Wiggins plaintiffs are part of a settlement and a validated judgment that imposes certain obligations on both the CRA and the City of LA, and would do so on the successor agency. I'd like to echo the comments of the other speakers regarding the skills and knowledge of the CRA staff, particularly vis-a-vis affordable housing. As I'm sure you are aware, Health and Safety Code 34176 permits you to retain the housing functions even without becoming the successor agency. So if that's the way you wish to go, I certainly urge you to name a successor agency for housing in order to safeguard our community's valuable affordable housing resources, and also which would also allow you to fulfill the city's obligations to both existing projects, judgments such as Wiggins, and that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, we have Madeline Janis, please come forward. We have Cindy Starrett, Tim McCosker, and John Whitaker.
Hello, members of council. My name is Madeline Janis, and I'm the longest-serving CRA commissioner. I've been on the CRA board for almost 10 years. Also, the executive director of a nonprofit. I know that these are really challenging politics, and that you are in an impossible position over a barrel and all those things. So I'm here today to talk about the consequences to your districts, your community, your constituents of not becoming the successor agency. What I've seen over all this time is that oftentimes the most glamorous part of doing all this work is the approval part. But the hard work, the really difficult, challenging work, is actually taking it from approval to getting that certificate of occupancy and to seeing the project built. My concern is you've got $400 million of projects in the pipeline right now that have been approved already by us and by you, This is your legacy. This is the mayor's legacy. This is what is hopefully going to be one building block in lifting us out of the Great Recession. We're talking about tens of thousands of jobs, and now I'm only talking about the existing approved projects that are, you and your staff have put your heart and soul into these projects. So I'm not saying anything to you that I know you don't already know. But I know from looking at the details of these agreements and seeing the challenges that come from lack of proper implementation, that we're talking about things like, for example, how do we get all the people that are going to be employed from your neighborhoods, your districts, into the jobs of those projects that have been approved? We have our construction careers policy, we have our prevailing wage policy, we have our local hire policy. All of that work comes on the implementation side. And we're talking about tens of thousands of jobs. So this is not just something that's a kind of minimal or side importance. It's centrally important. So the other thing to think about is community revitalization and hugely important projects like, for example, the Watt Star Theater and many others. So I hope that you'll consider
Thank you.
possibly working out being the successor agency.
Thank you very much. Next.
Good morning, council members. I'm Cindy Starrett from Latham and Watkins. I'm here on behalf of CCA and the LA Chambers, very concerned about these issues. I completely agree with Madeline. We have to have the city be the successor agency. The city is the only entity that has the incentive to work out all of the implementation issues so these projects can survive. The projects that were approved in the last couple of years are the most vulnerable and also the most important, because those projects that were approved during the recession and are dependent on redevelopment funds are now questioning and in jeopardy of financing because of all the uncertainties. Senator Padilla's proposed bill that would extend this date to April 15th is critically important. We're all in support of that, and we hope that whatever action the city does decide to take, you're very specific that if the city cannot become the successor agency today, here are the things that would have to be fixed in legislation so you could become the successor agency. The message that you have the opportunity to send now is that Los Angeles stands behind those who have invested in Los Angeles and the people that are working on these projects. The projects that are supported by redevelopment are not just in downtown. All three of us have been very involved with CCA and with the Renaissance of Downtown, of which we're all very, very proud, but also the Valley and Councilman Alarcon's district, South LA, all parts of Los Angeles have benefited from redevelopment. And these projects must be able to go forward with confidence that even the details, like their schedule for implementation, their design for development, the financing, the estoppels that they need, the projects that are built still have financing and obligations to meet, and they need staff to be able to work with. They need a city and an agency that cares about supporting them. The message the city can send now to business is that you should continue to invest in Los Angeles, and we are behind you, and we ask you to send that message.
Thank you.
Tim McCosker, Mayor Brown. I'm also the chair of CCA this year, and in the interest of time...
Mayor Brown as a law firm, not an elected official.
Not Mayor Brown. Hey, people will ask me... Yeah. I'll make phone calls, and those tough phone calls, and not sure you're going to get through. I go real quick. I'm from Mayor Brown. Goes right through. Willie or Jerry?
Yeah.
In the interest of time, really the underpinnings for you is the risk. I mean, you look at it, and very understandably, you have excellent analysis in front of you that says there's just too much risk here. There is a substantial amount of risk for the city. Well, imagine the risk on this side of the table. Don't cut and run because of the risk. There is an extraordinary amount of risk, of course, for employees, and Madeline talked about the implementations, but imagine the risk for those folks who are investing big dollars in big projects and participating in economic revitalization of the city of Los Angeles. And by the way, this is obviously a statewide issue, and everyone's watching what Los Angeles is going to do. Are you all going to cut and run? Or are you going to work it out with Sacramento? Are you going to take the risk that this side of the table is taking? And you're used to risk. You can do it. I mean, I would recommend do what it takes. Listen to your experts, but sit with Sacramento. You all have significant Sacramento experience too, and share the risk with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
John Whitaker, real estate land use partner with DLA Piper, a downtown law firm, and I've been representing developers and investors in downtown and other redevelopment project areas for 30-plus years. So I'm on the other side of the table with these people here, with people who have, some of whom have enforceable obligations, others are property owners, others are potential investors, and I couldn't agree more with what all the three people have said. Don't cut and run. We need to have the city stand behind what the CRA has approved in the past and what the city has blessed, and don't send the wrong message to the development community and the investment community. I don't understand the liability is. Page 22 of AB 26 says the liability of the city is limited to the revenues you receive and the value of the assets you received. I support proposed resolution 1B, which is you elect to be the successor agency, but then clean up if there's some risk of liability that the city attorney is concerned about, address it in a cleanup legislation, but don't run because of just the risk of it. I think you can limit it. The Oversight Board is limited to increasing revenues, cutting expenses. You can work within this framework, and please do that. Worst case, though, however, going forward, I hope that, and I pulled off the shelf real quick the redevelopment plan for the downtown area that still survives, that was in 2002, and I assume the other redevelopment plans are the same. Under Section 800 says that the administration and enforcement of the plan or other documents formulated pursuant to the plan shall be performed by the agency and or the city. This is critical. If you do not become the successor agency, do not let some other agency take over responsibility for administering the plans which continue to exist, which I understand will continue to exist. Please keep that in the city. Please keep it in your planning department so we know who we're dealing with. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Our last four public comment cards are Steve Kaufroth, Gary Russell, Shiraz Tangri, or I'm sorry, I can't read that, and then Lisa Payne. Please begin.
Thank you. Steve Kaufroth here on behalf of AFSCME. We represent the majority of the workers at the redevelopment agency here in Los Angeles, 4 locals in total. And I don't want to be shy in saying that we represent the best darn economic development team anywhere. And knowing that, and knowing that we have partnered with not just the city, but also the CRA-LA in actively advocating for the protection of redevelopment, and advocating specifically that the text of the bill language that is still in motion at this point provided for security, not just for our own interests, but for the city interests and whoever the successor entity might be. And we wholeheartedly disagree with the assessment of the liabilities that have been identified by the CLA and CAO's office. We have identified 4 different sections within the bill, only one of which has been addressed by the CLA, CAO. And we provided a letter to the members. We ask you to take a look at that and specifically review those sections. Because of time, I don't want to go through those, but happy to discuss those further if you have questions. But the bottom line is that the intent of the language and what we lobbied for and what we believe we got was to make sure that any of the costs that are associated with winding down the redevelopment activities would continue to get paid for from tax increment until those projects were completed. And we believe those costs are adequately protected. In the event that there's some disagreement about whether or not those liabilities are secure, I agree with the statements that you've heard before in terms of taking a risk. We don't discount that there is a lot of uncertainty that is before us in terms of what might happen. Right now, there is no agency that has the tools to do redevelopment in the future. Though we believe that in the near future that those will come to play. That we hope that we will be able to advocate those be returned to the city, and that we'll be able to do the economic development that the citizens of the city need, that our members are doing day in and day out, working hard for the citizens, hard for the city, and changing the face of this city. And we ask that the city consider that, keep the talent that you've got here in the CRA, and become the successor agency.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We still have some more public comment. We can bring them back up for quick, and that's going to be very quick.
Are you saying that you believe that there are provisions that would determine that the actions of the state would create an unfunded mandate?
That's one of the provisions. There are other provisions that I believe come into force even before the state mandate would come into play.
Okay.
But yes, I do believe that, we negotiate.
In other words, the state would have to cover any risk.
I believe so.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Gary.
Good morning. My name is Gary Russell. I'm the chairman of the Wilshire Center Koreatown CAC. I have a long history with the CAC with CAC and CRA for 15 years. I've seen a lot of benefits, and there's still benefits to be made. I'm here to support the city as a successor entity for the CRA. The city has a long history and experience and still has the most to benefit from the CRA's work. There are still CRA projects that need city involvement. I understand, there's some issues in the funding and the long-term projects, but I think hopefully the city can work with the state and look at those funds to continue the long-term projects without having to really tap into our general fund. Obviously, is an issue. But I think, the city and the state can work together, hopefully, to continue these projects, and it makes the most sense that it stays with the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good morning. Shiraz Tangri. I'm a partner at the law firm of Alston Bird, a downtown law firm. I also serve on the Downtown Neighborhood Council as its planning and land use co-chair for the last 6 years. And I also serve on the City Center Community Advisory Committee. I've represented in my own working life redevelopment projects ranging from a young artist who wanted to convert his workspace so he could live and work there, to the Grand Avenue project and everything in between. I would argue that modern Los Angeles has been transformed by and is defined by redevelopment projects, not just in downtown, but in Hollywood and other parts of the city as well. Staples Center, LA Live, Grand Avenue, the examples are legion. I agree with the comments that many people have previously made about the need for the city to stay in as a successor agency. I also would express the concern in having read the CLA report that, with due respect, the city cannot wash its hands of these liabilities simply by electing not to be the successor agency. The projects remain within the city's jurisdiction. I think the litigation risks remain very heavy for the city if they walk away from these projects, candidly more so than if the city continues to be the successor agency. Last, I'll echo the comments on the quality of the staff, people that have worked, whether you want to call them biological capital, institutional knowledge. There are real people here who have worked on these projects, love the city, have committed to the city, and have done wonderful things, and we shouldn't lose those people and the knowledge and expertise that they bring based on this very short turnaround to make, obviously, very difficult decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa?
Hi, I'm Lisa Payne. I'm with the Southern California Association of Nonprofit Housing. We are a membership organization of nonprofit affordable housing developers who have also worked hand in hand with the CRA and with your offices to build homes for working families in Los Angeles, homes that, clean up in better neighborhoods as well and provide lots of jobs to local people. They pay prevailing wages, and some of them are done with union work. I would like to make a couple comments. I would first like to echo how important keeping the staff is, how important their work has been. I question whether some of the pension liability would also be a problem for the city if the city just sends this to a successor agency. I would echo the comments made that perhaps, given the importance of this issue, we should ask for an outside opinion in the next couple of days from a law firm specializing in redevelopment law to really weigh the different liabilities that can come from from the city keeping the successor responsibilities versus sending them out. I would also like to say that I have seen some different opinions about whether giving giving up, whether sending this off to a successor agency gives up the city's right to name the successor housing agency. And I just want to make sure that we're clear that even if you decide to give up being the successor agency to the CRA, that you still have the right to name the housing agency later. And again, I would echo the request that it be LAHD.
Thank you very much. Okay. And the three names that I will call up will each get 1 minute apiece, and that will conclude our public comment from the public. William Delvac, Oscar Novello, and Jose Trujillo. If anybody else turns in a public comment card, then we will read their name into the record. Thank you. Please begin.
Honorable council members, Mr. Miller and Mr. Santana, the city no longer has its first choice. The legislature and the courts took that away from you.
Your name again?
William Delvac, Armbruster, Goldsmith, and Delvac. What's before you are not acceptable second choices by your standards or the private sector standards, but yet you must choose. It's a risk management issue. I could speak about the affordable housing I've been involved in or the development projects, but I want to focus on something that's truly tragic in the confusion that's here today. There are a number of projects merely awaiting simple signatures on agreements or simple approvals. Projects recently approved, including the Lankershim Lofts in North Hollywood, need an approval simply because they got a city variance, so under the redevelopment plan, they need a variation. Understandably, the city attorney and the agency has been exceedingly cautious, but now's the time for some more bold action. Any agreement that could be approved should be approved. I would also recommend that the council create a task force with the private sectors, the developers, and the affordable housing workers so that we can look at legislative options.
Thank you very much. Next.
Yeah, my name is Oscar Novello, councilman, and members of the committee. I only need a minute because I just wanted to address a couple of points in the employee section of page 5 of the CLA report and make sure that whatever decision you make, just know that staff members will have to deal with it. We're all adults. I'm not a boy anymore. I'm 43 years old. So I will deal with whatever I have to deal with as an employee of the CRA with whatever you decide. But what I do want to make sure is that when you make a decision that you make it based on facts. And quite frankly, the CLA's report is pathetic. It has a lot of it makes a lot of comments that just don't jive with AB 26. And I would invite you to put it aside and make a decision based on what you know, because the report definitely doesn't help. And I could also, along with Steve Koffroth, enumerate a lot of different sections, but I don't think we have the time for that. But just know that it's not a very complete report and factually unbased.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jose Trujillo, Vice President of Council 36 AFSCME, and also employed by the city CRA LA. I started here in 1970-something. I'm not going to go far. Many of you were very young. I'm going to make it plain and simple. You guys always wanted to be the successors, always said, we're going to take you over. Here is your opportunity. Okay? The other thing is, no other city in the state of California has bailed out on their agencies and employees. We have been very loyal to every single one of you. We've been very loyal to every citizen of the city of Los Angeles. You ask us to be loyal, to have ethics, to be responsible. And that's exactly what we expect from the city council, for you guys to be loyal to the CRA employees. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comment on this item number 6. And we'll now go to our staff to present the report.
Good morning, Jerry Miller. For the record, Jerry Miller, Chief Legislative Analyst. I thought I would get started with sort of framing the issues, and then Miguel will step in and walk you through some of the details on the report relative to, some of the pros and cons and et cetera. I think there are a couple of issues that need to be kept in mind throughout this discussion. That redevelopment as we know it is gone. The redevelopment that you've experienced, the professionals that go out and find deals, they find land, they put deals together, AB 26 has ended that. So what we're dealing with here in the decision to be a successor agency is strictly focused on completing projects that have contractual obligations and unwinding the agency. That is all the successor agency can do. Now, the issue of economic development, is an important one, and one that has to be discussed and discussed soon. But the fact of the matter is that irrespective of your decision on successor agency, that issue is going to have to be dealt with. That is not part and parcel to the decision before you today.
Jerry, and there's a finite date on that decision?
Yes, that finite date is Friday.
It's Friday, and the decision is to affirm or to say that we will not participate as a successor agency? What is the action that's required?
If council takes no action, it by default becomes the successor agency. In order to opt out, you would need to adopt the resolution. Both of those options are before you, so that whatever decision you make, you can make.
So no action by the council means that that we, by default, we follow through as a successor agency?
Yes.
So an action would need to take place in order to opt out, and that action is in the form of what kind of document?
A resolution by the legislative body.
Thank you.
And to be clear, it did come up, this is not about the housing successor agency. We will be back to you with that discussion. This is strictly the CRA piece on the successor agency.
Thank you.
There are, again, a number of things that are the same regardless of whether or not the city becomes a successor agency, and it's important to make the distinctions about what's impact and what is not. The Oversight Board is what it is. The legislation calls for a 7-member Oversight Board. In essence, 2 would be appointed by the city, 4 would be appointed by the county, and 1 would be appointed by the community college district. So 5 of those 7 members are incentivized to try and liquidate this as quickly as possible and get their money. So the bottom line is, no matter what we do, there will be no control over the board decisions by the city.
Hold on.
Sorry, you said with the board of what?
The Oversight Board of the successor agency.
Are you assuming, wouldn't those successor agencies, if under the description you just gave, wouldn't they bear the same risk that the city bears?
Yes. Well, as we get into the risk, the successor agency will bear the risks that we will be discussing.
No, I understand that, but when you described the Board of Supervisors, the Community College District, and those other, it's my belief that they would not take on the agency. So,
well, again, the Oversight Board is the Oversight Board. The successor agency is a different discussion. Whether it's the city, whether it's the county, whether it's a special district, the Oversight Board is 2 from the city, 4 from the county, and 1 from the community college district. The successor agency is the staffing and winding down and administration of the projects. That could be, if the city opts out, it could be the county. If the county opts out, ultimately the governor would appoint a 3-member panel of county residents that would act as the
the Oversight Board
successor
is something different than the successor agency.
It is.
Correct.
If I could add, Miguel Santana, CEO, the legislation was designed to give the majority of the authority to the Oversight Board. They are the ones who make determinations as to what moves forward and what doesn't. They approve all expenditures. The role of the successor agency is simply to implement their directive. And in addition to that, the Oversight Board is subject to review by the Department of Finance, which reports to the governor. And so, to clarify, the successor agency is not a decision-making entity. It is strictly an entity that implements the directive of the Oversight Board as supported by the state.
So the Oversight Board, in your report, you take it for granted that we understand that the Oversight Board will take place regardless of what actions the city takes.
Yes.
That has already been put into law by the state legislature and signed by the governor.
Yes.
And the membership is exactly as Jerry said, which is dominated by the county. And if you take a step back and think about why the legislation was introduced in the first place, and that was to provide new revenue to schools and to the county, and yes, even to the city, as the various assets and program of the CRA gets liquidated. And I'll pass out if you want to see.
But with all due respect, when you say new revenue to the city, it categorically sounds like it's new, but it's less dollars than before this legislation was coming to the city in the form of CRA dollars.
It is, and actually that was the next bullet point and sort of the overviews.
Please continue,
Mr.
members.
Chair.
Hang on, hold on 1 second. Write down your questions. I asked Alarcon if it could be quick. It wasn't quick. So are you going to be brief?
It's going to be brief.
Okay.
The county has a history of going into litigation against the city to eliminate CRAs, correct?
Yes.
And 4 of the members of the oversight are of the county.
Yes.
So it stands to reason, given the historic context of the county's role in going to court against the city, that they would be acting as if they would have wanted to more vigorously dismantle the CRA and everything that it represents. Would that be accurate?
You should assume that, but that is independent of the city's decision whether or not to be the successor agency.
I understand that, but it speaks to the context of the behavior of the oversight.
They are on the oversight. They do control it. They will be incentivized to try and dismantle the agency. Now, very quickly, on the property tax flow, that is what it is. The estimates are on an ongoing basis about 70 to 20 million, regardless of whether or not we are the successor agency. Now, as Miguel will get into, the tax monies are substantially higher if we are the successor agency. But that additional money is dedicated solely to the successor agency's activities in winding down the agency, and it is not enough. So at the end of the day, we end up with less net money to the general fund as successor agency than not. Finally, I think we need to very quickly, staff reductions. Staff reductions, unfortunately, are going to occur. The legislation caps the administrative fees beginning in a year at 3% of the total gross tax increment. That represents an 80% reduction from the current administrative budget at the CRA. So that is unavoidable, regardless of whether or not the city is a successor agency, unless the city is willing to pick up that cost on its general fund. Finally, it has to be recognized that the only thing that the Oversight Board is authorized to do, the only thing the successor agency is authorized to do, is enforceable obligations. And this goes to the issue of the seat at the table and what we are advocating to the Oversight Board. It wouldn't be advocating for a project because it's going to create jobs. It's not advocating for a project because it's eliminating blight. It's not going to be advocating for a project because it's going to create housing. It is advocating and arguing that a project has an enforceable contract behind it. All of those issues I talked about are irrelevant to the Oversight Board, and they're irrelevant to the operations of the successor agency. The only issue is whether there are enforceable contracts that have to be honored. So in the discussion of, it actually took me a while to get to the place where I made the recommendation I made. My gut reaction was we needed to be there. But in looking at this and in looking at the role, being there is arguing essentially a legal issue, not a policy issue. And we can't control the outcome of that argument. We can't argue the necessity, the advisability, the benefit of projects. All we can argue is whether there's an enforceable agreement. And in light of that, in light of the risks, I just can't recommend that we step into that position.
Go ahead. I think Jerry is correct. For me, in the 2.5 years I've been here, believe it or not, this has been probably the most difficult thing to recommend on, because there is no clear path. And as been argued by folks during public comment, there is conflicting interpretations on the legislation itself. So I go back to what the ultimate intent was. And again, the intent was to free up dollars to help address the shortfall that the state is facing, particularly in the area of schools. So based on that intent, and based on how it's structured in terms of who has the authority at the end of the day, being the Oversight Committee with the blessing of the governor, the projects and the program that the CRA is going to be proceeding is going to reflect those needs. The pie chart that I just shared with you shows that for every asset that gets liquidated by the Oversight Committee, or by the successor agency through the direction of the Oversight Committee, how that money is distributed. Half of the money goes to the schools. And so addressing a shortfall that the state is facing. A quarter of it goes to the county. And then a quarter of it goes to the city's general fund. And so when you look at that motivation and the way it's structured, basically against the interest and the work that the CRA has done, the risk then becomes an analysis of what is the likely outcome. So in projecting out the potential costs to the general fund, we had to take a very conservative approach as to what that risk would be. The $109 million that's cited in our report assumes an outcome that has been consistent with how this issue has proceeded forward, which is meaning that it's designed around generating as much money for the state. It assumes that while the legislation cites that pension obligations could be taken off the top, it still gives that authority to the Oversight Committee to make that determination. And what wasn't included was analysis that of things that we know, such as in the CRA, there was an ERIP that was also adopted. The ERIP is being fully paid for by the city by CRA employees. And if the agency doesn't exist, that liability also gets incurred now by the successor agency. It also doesn't look at what the potential cost would be of maintaining a workforce and those future costs. The pension costs that we talk about in our report talk about those costs that have been incurred so far, not what the cost will be from here on forward, because we don't know what that's going to be. We don't know whether they're going to be CalPERS employee pension contract or they're going to be lacers. We don't know what the contribution rate will be of employees. Currently, they don't pay towards that benefit. Most city employees pay 11%. So all of those are unknowns that raise that number. Finally, the important thing to understand here is that I think Jerry and I both agree that in a different context, should these issues of liability be mitigated? Should it be clear in the legislation that, yes, in fact, the pension cost has to come out of the top? Should it be clear that the liability that we don't know about yet for any lawsuits that occur will be paid for entirely by everybody's share, not just the city's share? Should there be clarification as to how do you transition employees that are in an entirely different system, different classification system, different pension system, different salary schedule into the workforce? Should those issues be addressed, then I think Jerry and I would be in a different place. We would be recommending that, in fact, we do take on the responsibility of the successor agency because these are important projects and we are the best people to advocate for them. But unfortunately, we do not have those assurances. And with the reality of our own fiscal situation in the general fund, where we're currently facing a $72 million deficit and next year $200+ million deficit, the risk is simply too great. And so our primary responsibility is that protection of the general fund and to mitigate those issues there.
Okay. Thank you. I want to ask you some questions. First and foremost, I'm glad that you had an opportunity to clarify the report when it comes to the liability issues, but I think we need further clarification when it comes to the pension obligations and mainly the pension obligations. I have a copy of the bill, AB 26, which was sustained by the courts, and it states specifically on page 15, and I'm going to read D and then a portion of subset 3. It says, "For purposes of this part, enforceable obligation," in quotes, means any of the following. And I'll go down to where it says, "For legally enforceable payments required in connection with the agency's employees, including but not limited to pension payments, pension obligation, debt service, and unemployment payments." Aren't those a portion of the outlined potential obligations that might fall on the city and infringe on the general fund? Isn't that segment part of the $109 million that is part of your report?
And we did study that carefully because that provided a glimmer of hope that in fact these costs could be incurred. But it also establishes a very narrow amount of dollars for administrative costs. The administrative costs are specifically outlined being 5% of the overall pot for this fiscal year and 3% for the subsequent year. What's not clear in there, when it talks about covering those costs, what in fact that means in terms of whether we're required to maintain the existing structure that we currently have with the number of employees, with the kind of benefits and schedule that we currently provide, with the kind of salaries we provide, and to what extent does it provide the Oversight Committee the authority to make dramatic changes to those areas. So the concern is, to the extent of which we deviate as a successor agency, should we choose, of engaging in a program with the assumption that all of that's going to be covered, okay? We move forward and start spending and providing the level of salary and benefits and pensions as we believe as that legislation that would be covered through the top. To the extent to which the Oversight Committee makes a different decision, okay, the successor agency is on the hook. And so part of the challenge here was to assess exactly how do you mitigate that risk when authority is given to an Oversight Committee to make those kinds of decisions, while on the other hand it states that some of these costs could in fact come from the top. And so that's why we're recommending, if in fact the city were to choose not to be the successor agency, but still want to explore it later, that this be one of the areas that immediately get addressed. That it be
by legislation?
To mandate, to take away the discretion of the Oversight Committee to move in a different direction than what's established. Because there's two conflicting sort of ideas that are occurring here. And at the end of the day, the Oversight Committee is not accountable financially for the decisions that they make. If the successor agency had the authority to make these decisions, okay, then we would be in a different place right now. But the successor agency has no ability to make any kind of those decisions. It could move forward and spend, but to the extent that the Oversight Committee doesn't approve those expenditures, the successor agency is on the hook for that.
Until it either gets clarified and/or some other authority ultimately weighs in.
Well, yeah, until there's
correct, until there's final remedy.
Right.
Because if there's an argument between the successor agency and the Oversight Committee, then obviously we'd probably get lawyers involved to try to clarify that they're wrong, they shouldn't have said that, they shouldn't have done that. Okay, I do have some other questions, but I did get a request from Councilmember Perry to make a statement.
Yeah.
So you'll be nice.
I've got a couple of quick questions I just wanted to put on the record. And this is a dark day. I don't know what to tell you, because I've been one of the biggest supporters of redevelopment, and have been this district has been one of the greatest beneficiaries of redevelopment. And when I review the list of projects in Council District 9 that are at risk given the court decision, it makes me physically sick at what we are at risk of losing. The decision is putting over nearly 4,000 construction jobs at risk, nearly 4,000 permanent jobs at risk, jeopardizing over 900 units of affordable housing, and these are just the projects that are at risk in some of my redevelopment areas in Council District 9, and I know that the citywide numbers are equally devastating now. Obviously, you know, I think we have a basic understanding that if the city were to elect to become the successor agency, the powers would be limited and financial risks to the general fund would be significant. Now, a long time ago, probably 2 years ago, maybe even longer, I did put in a motion to explore the establishment of a downtown community development corporation because of the number of units of affordable housing that were being built in downtown, and the economic development activity was at such a high level. So to that end, I do want to ask the CLA and the CAO to report back to this committee, and that was Council File 11-0354-S1. And that's separate and apart from everything that's going on here, but I want to be able to put that idea on the table so that we can look at that should we have another window of opportunity down the road. I'd also like to make a motion to ask the CLA and the CAO to report back on models that are used in other cities in the U.S. I'm particularly interested in the New York City model of economic development, funded by a dedicated revenue stream, and the City of Chicago's mega department that combines the functions of housing, planning, workforce development, and economic development. And I'm still trying to, examine my own personal feelings about whether the city should or should not become a successor agency, but I want to make it very clear, I believe in the work of the redevelopment agency. The staff that I have had the chance to work with, even beyond the 10 years in elected office, but prior to that, they are the most knowledgeable and have caused significant and positive change in our city and people's neighborhoods. And I am very, thanks. And even though I've had my disagreements over the years with some of the folks, I got to tell you, this trumps everything. And it's kind of like when you're faced with being told you're going to die, nothing else is important except saving the patient and rescuing the work that we started. I'm concerned about the redevelopment agency's housing assets and to make sure the affordable covenants are enforced and monitored, and that we as a city fully utilized the properties that were purchased with tax increment funds. And I don't think we're clear yet on what it would mean to the city to transfer these responsibilities to LAHD. So we need to have those questions answered. The redevelopment agency has been top-notch in securing grants, and I want to make sure we don't lose those grant dollars during the dissolution. And I need to know what plan will be in place to transfer existing redevelopment secured grants to other city departments for implementation. And again, I need to raise the question of existing redevelopment loans that may have been issued for pre-development with the intention of converting to permanent financing. We've got a lot of projects that are caught in that limbo. I need to know whether there will be a mechanism to make these kinds of alterations that do not require new funds, but do require some contract modification. And finally, I want to know, and we may not be able to do it up here today, but maybe in council, I want to know what the County of Los Angeles intends to do. The reason I need to know that, and Miguel, you come from the county, so you'll understand why I say this. You know, whenever we attempted to establish a new redevelopment area, we always got sued by the County of Los Angeles on the theory of diversion of property tax revenue. And it was infuriating. It was infuriating because they would sue us to prevent us from trying to lift up disadvantaged areas. And then if they prevailed, then we didn't necessarily get anything built, even when they won. Even when they won, we still lost. So what I need to know is what the county intends to do. I've heard the gossip, I've heard the rumors that they intend to opt out to and take a larger strategy of pushing everything back on the state. But I need to know if that's possible for us to get some kind of a indication in a formal way on the record, so that as we move forward on this, whatever this is, that we have some idea of what all the other moving parts are doing, so that we can make calculated decisions instead of in the dark.
Thank you, Ms. Ferry. Please, Please hold your applause. You have 5 elected officials up here. We'll get into competition as to who can get in the most applause, so don't encourage us. Councilmember Wesson.
Anyway, the chair always gets the most applause when we're up here. That's the rule. I've got a quick question and then a suggestion, Mr. Chair. When does the county have to make a determination as to what course of action they will take?
Well, the county has 2 decisions to make. The first one is how they handle whether they become the successor agency for their own redevelopment areas. They have a handful of redevelopment areas in the unincorporated areas. And what
are the timelines?
Oh, that they have the same time frame as us. They have to decide that by Friday, and it's my understanding that they're going to choose to be their own successor agency. They have, it's again a much smaller body than it is.
They have like 6 people.
They have
right?
about a handful of employees. The other question is whether if the city were to choose not to be the successor agency, the county or any other taxing jurisdiction district can submit a resolution to the county auditor controller and elect to be the successor agency. Okay? And it's whoever gets there first. There is no timeline as to when they could actually make that decision.
Okay. See, that shows just how complex but wait, Richard, it just shows how complex this issue is, because I thought I was going to get a simple answer like February 3rd, and that would be it. But no, this is my suggestion in the interest of time, and that we have to, Mr. Chair, move forward and start counsel to the city attorney, to the CLA. Can we just take this party downstairs? We go through the agenda.
Sure.
And we'll make this the first item after we go through the agenda, and we will continue this debate. I know we do have some members that have requested to leave early, so I think what we do, we just immediately move this downstairs. I would ask the President Pro Tem to start the council while I have a quick sidebar meeting, and then within minutes we begin. And then, Mr. Chairman, I will then hand it over to you to finish the conducting this hearing as if it were a committee of the whole.
Is that a motion to move it out of this committee without recommendation?
I don't think we can make a...
No, but that's my point. I'm fine with that if that's the motion.
Whatever I have to do, Mr. City Attorney.
Because if there was ever an issue that the staff's going to have to duplicate and repeat themselves verbatim, it's this one.
Yes.
So by moving it downstairs, we'll get the breadth of all the members who are present today, and then we'll make the decision. Because the decision ultimately will be made by the body of the council, not, obviously a recommendation can be made from this committee to move forward or not, but in just a few minutes, we're going to have to hear everything and deliberate everything once again. Not that we can't do it twice.
So do I have to do anything?
Well, it sounds like you don't want to have it so that there's no consensus on the committee, just no action at all, and just
we want to take this to the third floor.
Because I know under Council Rule 69, it says that if the majority of the quorum is not in agreement, then they sign the report that's submitted without recommendation, and it would take a majority vote of the full council to take the matter up.
Okay. So we'll move this, in just a minute, I'm going to go to Mr. Reyes. We'll move this to the council without recommendation. Ms. Reyes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilman Perry covered a lot of the issues I wanted to address, given the technical issues and scenarios we need to build up. But I just want to take a personal moment. Many of you I've grown up with who's in the CRA. For 20 years, many of us started together and we went in our own different directions, and now you're in decision-making places, and see your heart and soul placed into this work, and to have it ripped out the way the state is ripping it out and the governor's treating it is I think it's just a cruel process in how they're treating our communities. So at this juncture, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your hard work. Thank you for your dedication to communities, and we'll do our best to salvage what we can, given the way this unscrupulous law has been established. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, the action of this committee is to move it without recommendation, and it's Suffice it to say that damn legislature. This committee is now adjourned.
What I think is, I had the rule